Tomorrow, NASA has scheduled another attempted launch of its Space Launch System, part of the Artemis program, after having cancelled the craft's first flight. Now, Monday's mission was postponed after a fault on one of the engines was discovered. Well, joining me now is Leroy Chiao, an astronaut and a former commander on the International Space Station. Leroy Chiao, lovely to speak to you. Thanks for being with us. So just have a little prediction. How confident are you this thing's going to get off the ground tomorrow?
Tomorrow's looking actually pretty good. The problem they had on Monday, the engineers believe it was a faulty sensor. There was nothing actually wrong with the hardware. And so the weather is looking pretty good. So as of today, as of right now, it's looking like a good chance of launching tomorrow.
And then talk us through the stages now then. So if it does get off the ground tomorrow, which we hope it does, this is just the first stage. This is the test launch, isn't it, to make sure that this space launch system works as it's meant to?
That's right. This is the first launch of this rocket, the Space Launch System, the SLS, and also the first real flight of the Orion spacecraft. I believe it's about a 42-day mission after it gets up into orbit and does the ground controllers perform all their checks. Then they will do what's called the trans-lunar injection burn, placing the spacecraft on its way to the moon. Once it gets to the moon, it'll do a circularization burn, and so it'll enter lunar orbit and spend several days testing everything, unfurling the solar arrays, making sure it can generate electricity and the other systems are working before returning to the Earth. And then they'll conduct a very critical test of coming back through the atmosphere and making sure that heat shield works to protect the spacecraft from that intense heat. Coming back from orbit, the leading edges of the spacecraft would get up to around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Coming back from the moon, you're going much faster, so the heat shield's going to get up to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Quite a difference.
It really is. And I'm glad you mentioned the coming back, because obviously the Orion capsule comes back, but the rocket itself, the Space Launch System, doesn't. And why is it? Why did NASA decide not to make this one reusable? Because, as you know, there's commercial rockets that are out there that are reusable. So why is the Space Launch System a one-launch wonder?
That's right. This rocket is entirely disposable, and that seems like it's becoming a little bit more of a quaint notion because of the commercial launchers. Most notably, SpaceX has been recovering the first stages of their Falcon 9 boosters reliably for a few years now. And so that's a valid question. Why are some of these components not being reused? Solid rocket boosters, for example, are similar to the ones used on the space shuttle. There's an extra segment and a bit of a redesign, but they are also not brought back for refurbishment and reuse. So this vehicle, unfortunately, is very, very expensive. It's the largest launch vehicle we've ever built. On the other hand, it's the most important expensive launch vehicle that we've ever planned to operate. NASA's Office of Inspector General estimates it'll be somewhere around $4.1 billion or so per launch, which is a lot more than the space shuttle price tag at the end of its life of around $800 million per launch.
I mean, you kind of touched a bit on it there, Leroy. The cost of it is astronomical, and excuse the pun.
Yes, it really is, and that's unfortunate. It's what you're looking at is it took a long time to get where we are today for NASA. This program started in one form or another in 2004, 2005, and then got a complete redesign in 2009, 2010. And in fact, I was part of that committee, that White House committee, the Review of U.S. Human Spaceflight Plans Committee. And then this rocket came out of that, and it was 12 years in development. So it's taken a lot longer than those of us who have been in the business would have hoped. For a reference point, NASA started in 1958 and launched astronauts to the moon for the very first time just under 11 years later in 1969. NASA built all its structure, built rockets, trained astronauts, built spacecraft, tested everything, built launch pads, launch control centers, mission control centers, did all that in less time than it's been even to develop this big rocket that hopefully will launch tomorrow.
And that was in the 50s and 60s when the technology was obviously far less advanced than we have now. All right, well, look, we're looking forward to tomorrow. Of course we are, and eventually this will hopefully carry human beings, back to the moon in a few years' time, right?
Well, that's right. If this flight goes successfully, then maybe in a few years, astronauts will basically kind of get on the same kind of vehicle, same rocket, and go around the moon in an Apollo 8 type mission. That is, they'll orbit the moon, but not actually land. And then, it's frankly, we're not sure. I'm not sure exactly when NASA's going to land humans on the moon again, because the lander is still in development. The funding is still, as you know, here in the US, funding goes by election cycles. And so, while I'm fairly confident we'll get that orbital flight around the moon, we'll have to wait and see when we can do the actual landing.
Yeah, I mean, the ambition is there, and let's hope that this space launch system carrying the Orion capsule gets off the ground tomorrow. All right, Leroy Chiao, former NASA astronaut and commander on the International Space Station. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Chiao. Thank you.